Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into a topic that's not only fascinating from a historical standpoint, but also incredibly practical for modern life. We're going to talk about what history can teach us about prepping, about how to prepare ourselves, our families, and our communities for times of uncertainty and hardship. Now, prepping often gets portrayed as a modern phenomenon, stockpiling canned goods, learning survivalist techniques, and making backup plans for when the grid goes down. But the truth is, people have been prepping for thousands of years. Ancient civilizations, medieval communities, indigenous cultures, frontier homesteaders, and families surviving the Great Depression or World War II. All of these groups had to be resourceful, resilient, and proactive in the face of challenges. In this video, we're going to travel through time and see how our ancestors dealt with scarcity, disaster, disease, and conflict. Then we'll translate their knowledge and tools into tips that we can use today by looking at centuries of human experience, from grain storage methods in ancient civilizations to the community gardens of the world wars and the frugality of the Great Depression. We can pick up a toolkit full of tried and tested strategies. Instead of relying on modern conveniences that might suddenly vanish, we can learn how to live sustainably off the land, preserve food without electricity, patch our own clothing, maintain tools, create community networks, and keep ourselves healthy and safe using low-tech methods that have stood the test of time. So if you're curious about what a Roman engineer, a medieval herbalist, a Native American hunter-gatherer, or a World War II-era victory gardener could teach you about prepping, you're in the right place. My goal is to show you that prepping isn't just about hoarding stuff. It's about skills, mindset, community building, and adaptability. By the end, I hope you'll see that learning from history can make us all more resilient, more connected, and better prepared for an uncertain future. When we think about ancient civilizations, we often picture grand temples, pyramids, and aqueducts. But what they did so well, and what we can still learn from, was the way they managed resources, ensured long-term food security, and adapted to their environments. Take the Romans, for example. They constructed complex aqueducts, cisterns, and reservoirs to keep cities hydrated, even during droughts. For a modern prepper, there's a valuable lesson here. Secure, reliable water infrastructure is the heart of any survival plan. One old-school hack we can use today is setting up gravity-fed water systems. You can collect rainwater off your roof, store it in barrels or cisterns, and let gravity move it through simple pipes. No electricity needed. It's an ancient idea that still works like a charm. Another great example is the Mayans and Incas. They adapted to challenging landscapes, steep mountainsides, dense jungles, and created terrace farms that prevented soil erosion and improved water distribution. In a modern context, if you have a sloped backyard, consider terracing to make the most of your garden space. Terracing also helps conserve water and prevent topsoil loss. Ancient societies stored grains for the long term in underground silos and sealed earthen containers. Today you can replicate this by storing bulk foods in airtight containers with oxygen absorbers, or even considering a buried cache system. The key principles remain the same. Keep it cool, dark, dry, and protected from pests. By revisiting these ancient principles, you'll find that you can create a reliable, low-tech food and water strategy that doesn't depend on modern convenience. Fast forward to medieval Europe, a time when pandemics like the Black Death ravaged communities and disrupted food supplies. We often think of this era as primitive, yet the strategies that emerged to cope with these hardships are still relevant. When plague struck, entire villages faced isolation and strict quarantines. Today, if a pandemic or similar crisis strikes again, we can learn from their social structures. Medieval communities that fared better often had informal mutual aid networks. Neighbors helping neighbors to harvest crops, bake bread, or care for livestock. For today's prepper, that's a huge takeaway. Building a trusted network of friends and relatives who share skills, resources, and responsibilities can dramatically improve everyone's chances. They also relied heavily on herbal medicine. Without modern pharmaceuticals, medieval healers used plants like garlic for its antimicrobial properties or elderberries to boost immunity. It might seem old-fashioned, but having a basic herbal apothecary at home, dried herbs, tinctures, poultices, can complement modern medicine. Even if the pharmacy shelves go empty, you'll have a backup plan. When it came to preserving food, medieval Europeans smoked fish and meats, salted them, or dried fruits and vegetables. This ensured they had some supplies during harsh winters. Modern preppers often focus on freeze-dried meals and canned goods, but don't underestimate the value of learning to cure and smoke your own meat. Setting up a small smokehouse or learning to sun-dry vegetables in a simple solar dehydrator ensures that you have ways to stock up on long-lasting, nutrient-dense foods even without refrigeration. Indigenous communities and nomadic groups around the world were masters of living lightly on the land, foraging effectively, and moving as needed. They understood their ecosystems intimately, timing their hunts and harvests with seasonal cycles. As a modern prepper, learning local foraging skills can be a literal lifesaver. Know which berries, nuts, mushrooms, and wild greens are edible and safe. Understand when fish spawn in local streams. Get familiar with traditional fire-starting techniques, flint and steel, bow drills, so you're not relying on lighters and matches. Many nomadic peoples carried nutrient-dense, portable foods like pemmican, dried meat mixed with rendered fat and sometimes dried berries. It's the ultimate survival snack, compact, calorie-rich, and shelf-stable. Consider making your own jerky or pemmican. Pack it in bug-out bags or camping kits. If supply lines fail, a stash of these ancient energy bars can keep you going. Emulating these indigenous approaches teaches you adaptability, local knowledge, and respect for the natural environment. By understanding your local ecology, you prepare yourself to find food, water, and shelter on the go. Think about the American frontier pioneers heading west with limited supplies and no guarantees. They relied on incredibly resourceful methods to survive. One classic technique is the root cellar, a simple but powerful concept. By digging underground storage spaces, pioneers used the stable temperature of the earth to keep vegetables, fruits, and even meats fresher for longer without electricity. You can build your own root cellar today. Just pick a well-drained area, dig deep, line it with materials like cinder blocks or stones, ensure proper ventilation, and add shelving. Suddenly you can store carrots, apples, potatoes, and squash for months at near-perfect conditions, even if your fridge is out of commission. Pioneers also embraced the DIY ethos, making their own soap from animal fat and ashes, crafting candles from tallow or beeswax, and repairing their own tools and clothing. Today, these skills are more relevant than ever if supply chains break down. Knowing how to sew, patch clothes, sharpen knives, or build simple structures can reduce your reliance on store-bought items. Another key frontier lesson is bartering. When money was scarce, pioneers traded eggs, flour, tools, or labor. Consider what skills or resources you could barter in a community. Maybe you know first aid, or maybe you have a garden surplus. Building a local barter network fosters resilience and reduces everyone's vulnerability. During the Great Depression, countless families learned to make do with very little. Meals were stretched with cheap filling ingredients, beans, lentils, root veggies, and people got incredibly creative with what they had. Today, if we face economic instability or sky-high food prices, we can learn from that frugality. Keep a good stock of dried beans, rice, and other low-cost staples. Learn recipes that use every part of your produce or leftover meat. Make hearty soups and stews that can feed a family for days. The Depression era also taught us the art of repurposing and upcycling. Old clothing became quilts or cleaning rags, tin cans turned into scoops, and broken furniture got fixed or reimagined. This mindset reduces waste and saves resources. In a crisis, the ability to see potential in so-called trash becomes an invaluable skill. Community gardens were another Depression-era innovation. Urban neighborhoods grew their own produce in vacant lots. You can start or join a community garden today. Not only will you get fresh, local food, but you'll also build relationships with neighbors, share tips, seeds, and harvests, and strengthen community bonds, which is critical in hard times. World War II introduced rationing on a large scale, forcing people in allied nations to survive on limited supplies of sugar, meat, butter, and more. Housewives and home cooks discovered creative substitutions, using applesauce to stretch cake batter or turning to beans and lentils when meat was scarce. For modern preppers, learning to cook with limited ingredients is a huge advantage. Stock up on shelf-stable foods like dried milk, powdered eggs, and basic spices so you can still whip up tasty meals if the supermarkets are empty. Victory gardens are another key lesson. During World War II, people transformed lawns and public parks into vegetable plots. Growing even a small garden at home can supplement your food supply. Raise quick-growing greens, root crops, and herbs. Learn to raise backyard chickens or rabbits if you can, for a steady source of protein. On the clothing front, "Make do and mend" was a slogan that urged people to repair rather than replace. Sewing, patching, and reusing clothing not only saves resources but keeps morale high when new items are hard to come by. During the Cold War, fears of nuclear war led families to build fallout shelters and practice duck-and-cover drills. While we hope never to face such extremes, there's a powerful lesson in psychological readiness and practicing emergency routines. Consider doing your own drills. Test your bug-out route to your safe location, practice purifying water from a nearby stream, and review first aid procedures with family members. Rehearsing these activities reduces panic and confusion when real trouble hits. The Cold War era also saw advances in long-term food storage, like canning and freeze-drying. Today, embrace these techniques. Learn safe canning methods, pressure canning meats, water bath canning high-acid foods, and consider storing freeze-dried meals. Keep track of expiration dates and rotate your stock. Maintaining a sense of preparedness can also keep you calm under stress. Building mental resilience is just as important as having physical supplies. Meditate, exercise, stay informed, and remember that communities that endure hardships often do so because they remain level-headed and supportive, not because they panic. In today's world, we have a wealth of technology at our fingertips: solar panels, water filters, vacuum sealers, and more. By combining these modern tools with historical wisdom, we get the best of both worlds. For instance, integrate old preservation techniques, like root cellars or fermentation, with modern vacuum sealing to extend shelf life even further. Or use a solar dehydrator for drying fruits, tapping into both ancient sun-drying methods and modern materials. One thing history teaches us is the vulnerability of long supply chains. If you can produce even a fraction of your own food, clothing, or energy, you reduce your dependency on these fragile systems. Learn a traditional craft like blacksmithing or woodworking. It's not just a hobby, it can give you a means to repair tools or build essential structures. If that sounds too complex, start smaller. Get comfortable growing herbs in pots, learn to bake bread from scratch, or try making homemade cheese. Each self-reliant skill you acquire helps buffer you against future disruptions. Now let's delve into some of the more creative and less commonly discussed prepping hacks that history can show us. Take underground caches. In times of war or occupation, resistance fighters buried supplies, food, ammo, documents in waterproof containers for retrieval later. You can do the same, placing sealed PVC tubes or metal containers of seeds, tools, or valuables around your property or secret locations. Mark them subtly so you can find them, but not so obviously that others will notice. Fermentation is another advanced technique. By fermenting vegetables into sauerkraut or kimchi, you're not just preserving them, you're enhancing their nutritional value and shelf life. In the days before refrigeration, fermented foods prevented scurvy and improved gut health. Learn to do this safely. Keep everything clean, use the correct salt ratios, and taste regularly. Fermented foods can last for months and provide essential nutrients in a crisis. Seed saving is a skill often overlooked in modern society, but crucial historically. If you save seeds from heirloom plants each season, you create a self-sustaining food cycle. Over time, seeds adapt to your local climate, growing stronger and more resilient. This reduces your dependence on commercial seed suppliers. Adding this skill to your prepping toolbox ensures that even if stores run empty, your garden can continue producing year after year. All throughout history, especially in times of hardship, it wasn't just about stockpiles and individual skills, it was about community. During droughts, plagues, wars, and economic collapses, communities that cooperated survived better. People formed mutual aid networks and cooperatives, pooling resources and distributing work fairly. In today's prepping world, consider forming a local preparedness group. Assign roles based on expertise. Maybe one person is great with first aid, another is a skilled gardener, someone else is handy with carpentry or mechanics. Having a structured system in place ensures that no one person shoulders all the burden. Conflict resolution is also important. Historically, elders or councils mediated disputes and kept groups cohesive. Practice clear communication, listen actively, and learn mediation techniques to prevent group tensions from escalating. The passing down of skills is another critical lesson. Historically, knowledge was shared through stories, apprenticeships, and community traditions. In your modern prepping community, hold Skillshare workshops. Teach your kids to identify wild edibles, repair a bicycle, or preserve jam. This ensures the knowledge lives on. strengthening the entire group and increasing everyone's long-term security. Let's get hands-on with a few time-tested techniques. Building a root cellar is simpler than you might think. Find a well-drained spot. Dig deep enough to reach stable temperatures, line it with cinder blocks or stone, and add a door. With proper ventilation and humidity, you can store vegetables for months. Learn to cure and smoke meats the old-fashioned way. Apply a salt rub, let it cure, then slowly smoke it with hardwood. Properly done, these preserved meats can last a long time without refrigeration. Fermenting vegetables? Grab a crock or even a large glass jar, mix sliced cabbage with the right amount of salt, and pack it tightly to create a natural brine. Within weeks, you have delicious, gut-friendly sauerkraut. Render animal fat into tallow or lard and store it in jars. It's excellent not only for cooking, but can also be used to make candles or soap. Vital if factory-made products are off the table. These old-school skills might seem quaint, but they're incredibly empowering. Once you know you can store food without a fridge, preserve protein without a freezer, or make light without an electric bulb, you gain a level of security and independence that's hard to overvalue. One of the biggest lessons from the past is the importance of sustainable agriculture. Ancient civilizations practiced crop rotation to keep soil fertile. The three-field system from medieval Europe, alternating between grains, legumes, and leaving a field fallow, ensured that the soil recovered its nutrients. Modern gardeners can do the same, rotating crops and adding cover crops like clover or vetch to fix nitrogen and improve soil structure. Incorporate composting into your routine. Collect kitchen scraps, dried leaves, and grass clippings, and let them decompose into rich, fertile compost. Add animal manure if available, just like farmers have done for millennia. This turns waste into resource and reduces reliance on chemical fertilizers. Rainwater harvesting is another ancient technique. Place barrels under gutters to collect water. Filter it through sand or activated charcoal filters and boil if needed. This gives you a backup water supply independent of the municipal system. You can create low-tech solutions like solar ovens, where a simple reflective box can cook a meal using only the sun's heat. Every time you apply a centuries-old approach, you're making yourself less dependent on fragile modern supply chains and more in tune with nature's rhythms. Before modern medicine, people relied on herbal remedies, careful hygiene, and quarantine to maintain health. You can learn to make tinctures by steeping herbs like echinacea, elderberry, or garlic in alcohol. Strain and store them in dark bottles. Salves and poultices made from comfrey, calendula, or plantain leaves can help with minor wounds, insect bites, or skin irritations. These remedies won't replace antibiotics or modern treatments, but they provide a useful supplement when professional care is unavailable. During wars and disasters, field medics learned to sterilize tools by boiling them, to dress wounds with whatever clean material they had, and to use pressure and elevation to stop bleeding. You should stock up on basic first aid supplies, bandages, gauze, antiseptics, and learn to use them. Good sanitation is crucial. If sewage and trash collection stop, you must know how to safely dispose of waste, dig latrines, and purify water. Disease prevention is as important as treatment. Set up a hand washing station, use soap or ashes if soap is gone, and remember that simple measures can prevent many illnesses. History shows that good sanitation practices can save as many lives as a stocked medicine cabinet. So what's the big takeaway from all these historical examples? It's that humans have always faced hardship, droughts, famines, wars, pandemics, and have come up with ingenious ways to cope. We have a wealth of lessons handed down through centuries. By combining ancient resource management, medieval herbal knowledge, indigenous adaptability, pioneer self-reliance, Depression-era frugality, wartime rationing techniques, Cold War psychological preparedness, and the modern ability to integrate old and new, we can create a prepping strategy that's robust, flexible, and community-oriented. The goal of this video isn't just to tell stories from the past, it's to inspire you to dig deeper into old methods, practice them now, and weave them into your modern life. Start small, learn to bake bread, grow a few tomato plants, patch your own genes, or make a simple tincture. Expand slowly. Maybe build a root cellar, practice bartering with neighbors, or learn to smoke meat and save seeds from your garden. Over time, you'll accumulate a skill set that's not just about survival. It's about thriving under changing conditions. Remember, history teaches us that we're stronger together. No single person can know everything, but if you share what you know, and learn from others, you build a network of resilience. Pass these skills on to younger generations. Make sure the knowledge doesn't disappear as we get more and more dependent on technology and convenience. If the worst happens, if there's an economic collapse, a pandemic, a major war, or a natural disaster, you'll be ready. Not because you read a modern prepping manual, but because you tapped into centuries of human experience. In the end, what history can teach us about prepping is that human ingenuity, adaptability, community, and the careful stewardship of resources have always been the keys to survival. The tools have changed over time, but the principles remain the same. By honoring and incorporating these lessons, we not only prepare for future hardships, but also reconnect with a rich heritage of resilience, ensuring that we can face tomorrow's uncertainties with the wisdom of the ages at our side. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through history's prepping wisdom. Stay curious, keep learning, and remember, you're part of a long line of survivors. Until next time, take care and be prepared.